is patriotic to be outspoken.
We are millions strong, and we want another world.
Don't give up.
It's exciting to write books that I wanted to see in the world.
This has been the most rigorous medication rollout this world has ever seen.
School's not prison. Get loud!
Good evening. I'm Bob Ross, President and CEO of the California Endowment, and I have the honor this evening of moderating our discussion with one of the greatest educators, philosophers, thinkers, and activists in our nation today, Dr. Cornel West. We're in for a very special evening with someone who I consider a personal hero. Before we dive into our discussion, I want to remind everyone that tuning in that this conversation is being recorded. It will be posted on the California Endowment's website tomorrow. We'll send everyone a link to the recording. You can share it with friends who couldn't be here or take another look for yourself. And before we begin, I want to introduce Frida Bloom and Andrea Lust, who will be providing Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation services this evening, and they have some instructions for us. Frida?
Thank you, Dr. Ross. In order bilanguage access have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into Spanish as well as American Sign Language. My name is Frida Blum, and I'll provide interpretation in Spanish, and my colleague Andrea Lust, who you see next to me now, will provide interpretation in American Sign Language. If you wish to continue to say Andrea after this demonstration, please click on the interpretation button and select American Sign Language, and now I'll explain how to enable the feature in Spanish. A efectos de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, contaremos con interpretación simultánea al español. Si usted está usando su computadora de escritorio, por favor, busque el icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Español o Spanish. Si está usando su iPad o su teléfono, entonces busque el menú de 3 puntos o que dice More en una de las esquinas de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Aceptar, Finalizar o Done. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida, and thank you to our services interpreters. So the chat is cooking. It's pretty hot. It's really popping, Dr. West, and a lot of excitement about your visit with us. We've got a packed agenda of conversation this evening. A lot of questions that were shared in advance from anticipated audience members, and I'll be posing some of those questions to Dr. West during the course of our conversation. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Cornel West. Dr. West.
Can you hear me and see me, my brother?
I can hear you just fine, my brother. Brother West, how are you?
And you can see me. Oh, here we are, my dear brother Bob Ross. What a visionary and courageous leader you've been, going all the way back to UPenn.
Oh, thank you, sir. Carry on, Dr. West. Say more. But this is about you, man, not about me. This is about
Leon Huff, Gamble and Huff. But we appreciate your leadership, 23 years, brother, because we've had dialogues before. I salute you. I salute your beloved family. You have been one of those to understand that the money flow has to go to the infrastructures and the movement and the everyday people. This is a rare shift, but you have made that with California Endowment. I salute you for that, and I look forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. And to the extent that we can claim any credit for that is because community leaders that we've been supporting, movement organizers, social justice advocates, we've been trying to be better listeners to them about strategy and investments, and that explains how we've gotten where we are. I'll say to you, Dr. West, you are a hero of mine and a hero to so many, but I want to say to you why. So I wanted to introduce you. I asked our communications leader, Sarah Reyes, if I could introduce you to the music of Sam Cooke. His song, A Change Is Gonna Come, is at the top of my playlist in my cell phone. I listen to it. First song I play every morning when I take my morning walk of reflection.
Wow.
And the reason is I play that song because Sam Cooke comes at us with some very harsh truths about injustice, but ends the song, and it's only a 3-minute song, ends his song with optimism and looking forward. And I have to say, over the years, anytime I've ever seen you on television, in an interview, reading your books, you go at it, brother, with some hard truths that we need to hear and wrestle with about injustice in this country. But I come away optimistic every time. And so that's why you are a hero of mine and to so many. And so we just thank you and honor you for spending time with us this evening.
Oh, I appreciate that. I mean, it's amazing. And that my beloved wife, who is a distinguished professor in her own right, Anna, she begins every class playing that same song.
Ah, there you go.
Isn't that something?
There you go. So download it, folks. Sam Cooke, the change is going to come.
Change is going to come. And keep in mind now, Sam Cooke, Curtis Mayfield, Sly Stone, never won a Grammy. Milli Vanilli won 2. Which means what?
There's a harsh truth right there.
Not the narrow titles and all the different prizes. Yes. It's the quality of your love and service to everyday people. It's the courage you muster and the backbone that you exercise to be a force for good. That's so much of the history of California Endowment, my brother. You know that, absolutely.
Thank you. So speaking of California, we have a California heavy audience this evening, folks from around the country, but California heavy. Nice. And folks want to know some of the questions we received in advance. They want to know about your upbringing in Sacramento. How did your family get to Sacramento? And I'm curious to know when the activist was birthed in Cornel West in his upbringing.
But you know, though, brother, I've always had a jump start in life, though, brother. I come from Irene B. West. I don't have a language to even begin to describe the depths of her courage, her vision, her love, her service, her sacrifice. Clifton L. West. Now, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was born in the same hospital as the Wilson brothers of the Gap Band at GAP, Greenwood, Arch and Pine, at Black Wall Street, that was viciously attacked in 1921. And so I'm from there, and I got my brother, Cliff West. I'm not half the human being he is, just like both of us try to be half the human being our mothers and fathers were. And that's true for Cynthia and Cheryl, our sisters, right? So that I come out of this love nest that is just overwhelming with compassion and shaping and molding. Then I'm connected to Shiloh Baptist Church when we get to the chocolate side of Sacramento and CalEndow for 9 months. Willie P. Cook, Deacon Hinton, Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school teacher. They loving us to death, brother. That's where I got my self-confidence, my self-respect, my self-regard, my sense that I can do what I need to do in light of the calling and vocation that I have. And then it was on to the movement. So when Martin was shot, something deeply in me died. I was 14. I was trying to be a track star. My brother, one of the greatest track athletes of his generation. But that hit me so. And I said, what am I really here to do?
Mm-hmm.
What is my calling, not career? What's my vocation, not profession? And it was really at 14, we shut down the high schools. With Glenn Jordan, Sac High, myself at Kennedy and Kenneth Jones and Michael Mann and so forth. We shut down the high school to have Black studies in high school, 14 years old. And then it was then that Black Panther Party's right down the street from Shiloh Baptist Church on 9th Avenue in Oak Park, which is another chocolate section of Sacramento. I was 9 years in Glen Elder, then 3 years in Southland Park Drive, multiracial. Had wonderful time in that regard. So Sacto for me is really, the home, and the home is where the heart is. My heart is really, really there. Mom and dad are gone, but my brother and 2 sisters are still there, and all of their precious relatives. So in that sense, though, brother, I had so much love coming at me, though, man. You know, I really did.
From multiple venues.
There's so many different sources. You know, Jim Washington, my best friend. Mark Ridley Thomas, I love like a blood brother. Take a bullet for that brother any day. Mm-hmm. It's that kind of overflow of love that I have been shaped by. But then I just also, very much like yourself, I just happen to come from a great Black people who, after 400 years of hatred, keep dishing out love warriors, and 400 years of terror, keep dishing out freedom fighters, and 400 years of trauma, keep dishing out wounded healers. That's what you did when you wrestled with the crack cocaine epidemic there in Camden. It hit you and you were wounded, but you decided to heal. I want to be a healer, given the sophisticated education that I have. I want to be one who gives my gifts to others.
And Dr. West, say a little more about the influence of your faith journey on your social justice activism and your time at Shiloh Baptist.
Yes, that one was that we, in those days, we had pastors who didn't have CEOs. We didn't have mega churches that don't have oftentimes a lot of mega courage and love. We had a small church with unbelievable love. Deacon Hinton would take me and Cliff out on the vanilla side of town. They had no kids, but we were like their kids. Sarah Ray taught us to think critically, wrestling with the book of Job, wrestling with some of the greatest literature in the history of the species, independent of whether you believe it or not. Now, I know, of course, we've got magnificent African sources. My dear brother, Maulana Karenga has taught me so much about the Kawida, and when his book comes out on Malcolm X, it's going to be the best thing written. So I don't want to act as if we Christians have some monopoly. It's just that as a Christian, I'm so deeply rooted in that tradition from the chocolate side and understand a God of the oppressed, providing not an optimism or a pessimism, but a hope that we at Shiloh were prisoners of hope. When we marched in every Sunday and said, we are soldiers in the army, we have to fight, although we have to cry, we got to hold up the bloodstained banner. We got to hold it up until we die. That's not just a song. That's my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's my life. I'm going to hold it up and be faithful unto death. So no matter what the circumstances and the conditions are, no matter how negative it looks, no matter how decaying and decadent our moment is, I want to be in the world, but not of it. I want to be a countervailing force to the kingdom. So Sarah Ray used to tell us, the kingdom of God is within you. And everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. That's not just words.
I hear some black prophetic fire going. So I want to refer to that, Dr. West.
Not just words.
This is Black History Month.
Yes.
I did immerse myself in your book, Black Prophetic Fire, which I recommend strongly. Nearly everyone I'm sure has read Race Matters. But I recommend strongly. It's a powerful structured dialogue between Dr. West and his editor, Krista Buschendorf. And in this book, Dr. West profiles 6 amazing, iconic, legendary Black leaders, from Malcolm X to Ida B. Wells. And I want you to, we're at a moment now where we need some Black prophetic fire. Dr. West. So can you define prophetic for our audience in this case and define fire? What are we looking for? What do we need?
Yeah, by the prophetic, I think we mean those who are willing to see a better not yet in the midst of the what is. So no matter how bad the crisis and catastrophe actually are, that they don't have the last word, that those Sly Stone call everyday people, those James Cleveland call ordinary people, their dignity, their decency, their voices, and the tradition that constitutes them ought to be the last word in terms of their resistance, their resiliency, their wisdom, their courage. Now, they're still human beings, so they're fallen, they're fallible. There's no doubt about that. But no matter how decaying and decadent our moment is, and I think we're living in many ways, in an empire that is in deep decay. There's been about 70 empires since the beginning of the species, going back to the grand, glorious heritage of Africa itself. And the United States is the 68th empire, and empires do come and go. And one of the things that the CalEndow has tried to do is constitute the glue that create countervailing forces against the organized greed and the institutionalized hatred and the routinized indifference to the plight of the weak and the vulnerable. And those countervailing voices need empowerment, financial, spiritual, intellectual, political, economic. But we have to be honest about the depth of the decay that we're wrestling with now. This market-driven culture obsessed with spectacle and status and celebrity and not enough concern with substantial lives lived of service to the weak and the vulnerable. And given that reality, we have to acknowledge that, you know, for Black folk, it's never really looked good. You know what I mean, no, brother? It's never.
And what does the fire need to look like, Dr. West? Not only for Black America, but
that's what all human beings.
For all of our nation, all of you.
But anytime you make a choice to be human in its deepest form, which is to choose integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, it takes courage. Courage is the enabling virtue for all of those other realities. Just like as a Christian, faith, hope, and love. Love is the greatest. Courage is the enabling virtue, which is another way of saying God can't use cowards. Freedom movements can't use cowards. If all you're doing is just going to be adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference, then you're not going to be part of the countervailing force, the oppositional force, the resilience, and the resistance. You just can't do it. You have to have backbone. And one of our problems these days is that in spiritual decay, you get everybody who wants to just fit in. Brother Martin used to say, you got to be maladjusted to injustice, not well adjusted. That's crucial. CalEndow Live understands that very well. You had Sister Angela and the others. They have lived lives like that, whether we agree with their ideologies or not. When it comes to being long distance runners of a certain kind of truth telling in relation to the Black struggle, they have made crucial contributions, as have you, my brother. As a medical doctor, man. I mean, every medical doctor.
Overly generous, my brother.
I'm telling the truth. I know it. Brother Mark Ridley Thomas has told me, and I believed it. We both love you like we love Brother Mark. So in that sense,
colleague. He's a great champion. So
really
back to Black Prophetic Fire and the leaders that are discussed and profiled in your conversation are Frederick Douglass, W.B. Du Bois, Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, Malcolm X, Ida B. Wells. We have a question from a listener. They want to know who your hero is or heroes. And I will just say for the audience, and one of the things I really gleaned from this conversation in this book, Black Prophetic Fire, Dr. West, is you talk about how messianic, charismatic, brilliantly eloquent speakers like Martin Luther King, like Malcolm X, imposed on our social consciousness. But it seems like your most generous words, by my reading, were for Ella Baker and Ida B. Wells. And I wonder if you could just expound on that a little bit and also answer the question, who is your hero? Who are your heroes?
Yeah, my brother, you asked some very profound questions though, man, because, I believe in the anthem of Black folk, which is lift every voice, not lift every echo. And so you got a variety of different voices that have their own distinctive integrity. And the very anthem of Black folk, of course, in lifting every voice is to say, you can't really have just one. You got to be a jazz man and say, I want a variety of voices, a cacophony of voices. And so when I think of what I was trying to do in that text, on Monday, I'd say, oh, I'm in an Ella Baker mood. Then on Tuesday, I say, oh, no, I'm in a Malcolm X mood. And then here come Martin and then Frederick Douglass. And I could go on. It could be Paul Robeson. It could be Sinclair Drake. And I haven't even got to Donny Hathaway yet. You know what I mean? So that all these different voices, I never want to just zero in on one. I want all of them. For Marcus Garvey saying, as long as Black people live in America, the Black masses will live lives of ruin and disaster. You don't have to be a Black nationalist to understand his love for Black people and his truth-telling about where we are even now. And the same would be true for a whole host of other folk from different ideologies and different political perspectives. It has everything to do with how deep is your love for Black people? Mm-hmm. What are you willing to sacrifice? What cost are you willing to pay? Do you agree with Mark when he was in that paddy wagon for 4.5 hours on his way to Reedsville prison? Daddy King told me and Andy Young, and when Martin got out, it was a German Shepherd was in there for 4.5 hours in the dark, barking at him, trying to bite him, and Martin walked out. He looked like he had snapped, looked like he couldn't walk. He could not walk a straight line. All he could say is, this is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. Now, Martin's not alone. He's not the only one. There's been a whole host. There's been some Muslims like Malcolm. There's been some Buddhists like Bell Hooks. There's been some agnostics like James Baldwin. There's been some Black Israelites. All of us are part of this tradition. I just happen to be Jesus-centered, Jesus-loving brother in that stream of the ocean. You see what I mean? And the question is, how do we keep that tradition alive in a moment of decay where so many of us seem to be willing to cave in and sell out and give up and somehow reduce all of that moral and spiritual greatness of Black people to just pecuniary success, financial success. And so we end up with a whole generation thinking that the aim and end of the Black struggle is just success for Black middle-class folk, as if Jamal and Letitia in the hood don't have exactly the same value and significance as anybody else of any color, Black, white, red, yellow, Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, Palestinian, Arab, whatever it is. I mean, that's what I learned at Shiloh, and I believe it. I believe it. Every human being made in the image and likeness of the Almighty God.
And as you noted while you were at Harvard, a Palestinian baby has as much value as a baby born in Israel.
That's right. The precious Jewish baby, never to be demonized and degraded. A precious Palestinian, precious Ethiopian baby, a precious Guatemalan baby, a precious Lithuanian baby. But I also add, see, for me, as a Black man, my love begins on the chocolate side of town. Because if I can't love my mama and my daddy and my grandmama and my granddaddy and those folk in my community, then the love I have for others will in the end be deficient. And we have a tradition. Too often we got Black folk loving everybody but Black people.
Yes.
And you could be highly successful in the mainstream, but you keep your distance. And you see, thank God, in the 60s and 70s, we had to hit that head on lovingly and say, wait a minute, that's a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. something just ain't right. Now, we got to straighten this out.
And by the way, you have a lot of musical references. You are a musician, are you not?
No, not really. I mean, me and my brother, he writes all the beautiful music, Clifton West. We got 3 albums we did. That was well with Prince and Gerald Levert and Talib Kweli and Jill Scott and Andre 3000. I was blessed to write songs with Bootsy Collins on his album, Funk Capital of the World. Won a Grammy last year with the Afro-Latin Orchestra of Arturo O'Farrell. But I don't really play an instrument. I played classical violin for 20 years. I haven't played it in almost 45 years. But music constitutes very much who I am. It's not ornamental, decorative in terms of who I am. You're absolutely right. And then when it comes to music, it's going to be John Coltrane, Curtis Mayfield, Sarah Vaughan, Aretha Franklin, James Cleveland, Walter Hawkins, and others. And your question about the fire?
Yes.
Walter Hawkins, what is this? I recommend folks to listen to that. What is this deep inside of me that won't allow me to hold my peace? Whatever it is. Because it's hard to define what it is, but it's got a whole lot to do with mama and daddy and grandmama and granddaddy, got a whole lot to do with Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells and A. Philip Randolph and Marcus Garvey. It got a whole lot to do with a whole lot of nameless ones, even the athletes, the Muhammad Ali's and John Carlos's, Tommy Smith. All of that is inside of us. So when I look at you, I can see your mama and daddy and grandparents working out.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, they make a difference. A big difference.
Dr. West, can you help me, and I think many others, with this question? It's a question in Black History Month and Black America and social justice in America more broadly, where it's a where are we now question. And there's a struggle I have. I wake up some mornings and I see the full-throated white supremacy resurgence and those politics coming back, embodied by Trumpism and clearly carrying on. And I conclude, it feels like we're losing ground. And then you see inspirational moments of, in the film industry, in music, in politics, in business. You see Black and brown and folks of color just doing amazing, incredible things. And so can you help us sort through this cacophony and confusion of signals? Is this country headed backwards or forwards in racial justice?
Yeah, and I tell you, I mean, part of it, we got a backlash of neo-fascism with Trump and DeSantis and others. There's no doubt about that. But even their movement is heterogeneous and diverse, because you got a lot of white working class brothers and sisters who are profoundly wounded and looking for a way out. They look for mainstream neoliberal politics, but it's too milquetoast, it's too tied to Wall Street, it's too tied to militarism abroad. It doesn't really fundamentally talk about the plight of working people. It's much more tied to the professional managerial class and their preoccupations with careerism and opportunism. And so instead of going in one direction, a more progressive direction, they move in a reactionary direction because the neo-fascism seems to be an alternative. And fascism has always constituted the far right alternative to a milquetoast liberal order. This is true in Italy, it was true in Germany after Weimar Germany. So in that sense, it does look like we're moving back. But on the other hand, we've had some major concessions. We broke the back of American apartheid. We tried to push back the more explicit forms of American terrorism, the lynching that was taking place that Ida B. Wells was so deeply concerned about and willing to have the bounty on her head to be on the front line against that. And what happened was we created spaces for the Black middle class, for the Black professional class, and that's very important. I don't want to downplay that. But the problem is that if we end up with a Black middle class and a Black professional class or a Black bourgeoisie that itself is indifferent to Black poor and Black working people, then you're going to end up with a whole generation of peacocks walking around strutting, saying, look at me, my money, my status, my power. And you can hear Brother Malcolm saying, with Ma Rainey singing in the background with the blues, peacocks strut because they can't fly. And those with Black prophetic fire are eagles. They fly high with style, with a smile, with the history at their back, with the greatness of a Black people, informing them, and at the same time saying, you got to find your voice in relation to our voices. But in flying high, we look low, real low. It's like the Commodore Zoom. I want to fly away, but fly away for what? You want to fly away in order to keep track of those precious folk in the hood, dealing with decrepit school systems and unavailable healthcare systems of quality and not enough jobs with a living wage and indecent housing. And that's been the history of the best of Black folk. Martin Luther King Jr. is a great example. Black middle class brother. He decides what? Deep solidarity with the least of these, 25th chapter of Matthew for him. And that's an example, but he's not the only one. But he was an eagle too. And when you're an eagle, you also get targeted, brother. You get shot down. The powers that be will shoot you down. Character assassination,
but
literal assassination.
Never losing sight and being anchored in a love for one's people. And you've been consistent about that over the years, love.
And that love for Black people must always spill over to vanilla sides and brown sides and indigenous people sides. And it spills over in Iran with our brothers and sisters struggling. It spills over with Jews if they're being targeted, mistreated in France or Pittsburgh. It spills over to Latin American peasants and working people, but it begins on that chocolate side. And that's the caravan of love of the Isley brothers. That's the love train of the OJs. And that's a very real thing. Again, not just songs sung, but lives to be lived. But what happens when that great tradition gets stale? The Black freedom tradition has always been the leaven in the American democratic loaf. American democracy expands when the Black freedom struggle is intense for women, working people, poor people, precious gay brothers, lesbian sisters, precious trans, and so forth. But when it gets stale, and see, right now we're at a moment where our Black freedom struggle is getting weaker and weaker. I just saw my dear brother Sharp, and I love that brother so many ways. We've been together 45 years. He's there when I'm in jail. I'm there when he's in jail. But at the eulogy for old precious brother Tyree at the very end, what does he say? Martin Luther King Jr. went to the mountaintop, and I'm gonna tell you what he saw. He saw Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. I said, quit lying, Sharp. I love you, brother Al. Quit lying. That's not what Martin saw. He saw new pharaohs, and some of those pharaohs were Black. Some of them were brown.
Yes, yes.
They come from different colors. They come in different genders because there's never been a function of skin pigmentation. John Brown is not an ally for Black people. He's a white brother who chose to be in solidarity. That's like saying Gil Evans is an ally in the Miles Davis Quartet. No, he's in the band. He ain't no ally.
Yeah, and
white
one
brothers
of the
and sisters who were in the band, they ain't allies. The brother playing the drums for Sly Stone wasn't Black. He wasn't no ally in the Sly Stone in the band. No, he is in the band. We got white brothers and sisters who've been in the band, but they got a lot of cousins who trying to crush the band. Ooh, that's part of the challenge.
And for those, not if you follow Cornel West, he's been a critic of the President Obama legacy. But I will say to you, in reading the, once again referring to the book Black Prophetic Fire, Malcolm, MLK, Frederick Douglass, a reminder that in the biographical inquiry of these leaders, they're flawed.
Absolutely.
They're human.
That's exactly right.
Right. And they also, which gives me hope, leaders evolve.
That's right.
Lincoln was not the same president in 1863 that he was when he was in Illinois in the 1850s. LBJ evolved, the Kennedys evolved, MLK evolved. And so it's what's the lesson there for all of us, Dr. West, in the humanity of leadership?
Yes, that's a lovely point though, because we have to begin with a sense of humility, that all of us are cracked vessels. As we used to say at Shiloh, we're trying to love our crooked neighbor with our crooked heart. And that ought to be humbling. But in being humble, we still ought to straighten our backs up and take a stand and be tenacious in regard to where we stand. So there's a number of battles going on, a number of wars going on, right? You got white supremacy, you got to take a stand. Male supremacy, you got to take a stand. There's class wars going on with capital vis-a-vis workers, and the power of capital that treat workers as if they're simply commodities to squeeze all the money you can out of them. That's a class conflict. You have to take a stand. And so when it comes to any of our figures or politicians, no matter what color they are, in the case of Brother Barack, as you know, I supported him twice. I did 75 events for him for free and was with him when he was at 4% because he was better than the Republicans. Well, that's not saying a whole lot because the bar is so low, but he was better than the Republicans. But when he did win, I told him exactly the same thing before the 75 events as after. I come from the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, which means I want to know what his relation to Wall Street, the militarism abroad, and the military-industrial complex, and the 57 cents for every dollar that goes to the military-industrial complex. I want to know what his relation to the new Jim Crow. I can't imagine having a Black president and not saying anything about Jim Crow in 1945. Why should we have a Black president in 2008 that can't say a word about the new Jim Crow? And he doesn't until the last year of his career. Why? Because he's got these neoliberals around him who are tied to Wall Street. Wall Street activity, insider trading, market manipulation, fraudulent activities, predatory lending. How many Wall Street gangsters go to jail? 0. Well, that's just wrong. That's wrong. Somebody had to call him out on it. You see, so someone said, Brother West, how come you so hard on the brother? I'm not hard on the brother. It's based on my love for everyday people. They're the ones suffering. We are here to serve the people, whoever we are. We're here to be of service, and all of us must be accountable. All of us will fall short. That's true. but we must be servants. So we have to fight against, Fox News and various attacks on the brother and his precious family, because they lying on he and Michelle and the beautiful children. They lying on him. But when he's so close to Wall Street and homeowners collapse and black middle class lose 58% of their wealth and nobody wants to say a word, well, not nobody, but not enough. Glenn Ford and others were saying that, Brother Maulana Corena was laying it out from his own distinctive view. A few of us were, but in the end, it meant what? We got to be unpopular. So what? If you think you're telling the truth.
Dr. West, remind our audience of, because you pointed this out several times. What was Dr. Martin Luther King's approval rating when he was leading the civil rights movement?
Isn't that the truth? 72% of white brothers and sisters in the country disapproved, and 51% of black people disapproved. They believed the New York Times, they believed the Washington Post when they said his critique of the Vietnam War is nothing but that of a communist. He's been reading the headlines of Radio Hanoi. He's a traitor. He's not a patriot. He's an enemy of the state. That's what they said about Brother Martin. Mm-hmm. And Martin told them what? Y'all don't understand who I am. I love black folk. I'm willing to tell the truth. And a Vietnamese baby has the same value as a white baby and a black baby. And therefore, I'm going to raise my voice. But the important thing to keep this in mind, and this is true for you too, you see, that we don't love black people in order for black people to love us back. My mama taught me I love black people because they're worthy of being loved, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the situation. If there was a chance of a snowball in hell that black people would never be free, I would fight for black people anyway, because that's how I decide to live my life. That's how I roll. That's what it is to be a son of Clifton and Irene West and come out of Shiloh.
Audience,
and be connected to Ella Baker. You see what I mean? That's what's inside of us.
Audience, you are seeing the fire in Black Prophetic Fire live from Dr. Cornel West. Okay, I'm going to run through a few questions, Dr. West, from audience. Jacqueline Williams from Southgate in Los Angeles County wants to know, what book is on your nightstand right now?
Oh, I think it would be.
I have a funny feeling it's more than one.
That's true, but this is the one to be. Young, Gifted, and Black. Lorraine. And I would want folk to both listen to the song written by Nina Simone. Nina Simone's daughter was the goddaughter of the great Lorraine Hansberry. Mm-hmm. Lorraine Hansberry never finished college, but a college went through her. So it's not just a matter of getting your credentials and your diploma. We want education to be widespread. But if, like Curtis Mayfield, you drop out in junior high, or if, like a whole host of other towering figures, you still are deeply involved in education and self-transformation and critical reflection and maturation of a courageous self, that's what we're after. That's Lorraine Hansberry. And what was at the center of her great play, Raisin in the Sun? Walter, how you gonna transfer and pass on this great tradition of these Black people? Yes. Sad and sweet indictments of misery, that's the blues. So soulful, sharing of soothing sweetness against the backdrop of grim catastrophe. Soulful people, delphonics and the dramatics and encounter and main ingredient. We ain't got through the mighty Dells yet, or the natural four of Richmond, California. Oh, what a tradition. Young, gifted, and Black. That 1959 is still so relevant. Travis, are you ready to take on this tradition and find your own voice? Hip hop generation, Siri X, J. Cole, Rhapsody.
Okay, Dr. West, I'm going to get to the next question. This is from Juanita Scott from Linwood. What do you think about the recent controversies about the AP African American history curriculum? Presumably she's referring to Governor DeSantis and the Florida.
Oh, yeah. Well, one is, the Du Bois says in one of his most powerful essays, The Souls of White Folk. A lot of people read The Souls of Black Folk, 1920, his most powerful piece in a critique of white supremacy. Reminds you of Malcolm X in some ways. The Souls of White Folk. He says America for so long has been predicated on the efficacy of lies and thinking it can survive based on the efficacy of life, which means we live in denial about its night side, about slavery, about Jim Crow, about its treatment of indigenous people, its treatment of workers, domestic households, and patriarchal violence of women of all colors, and trashing of gays and lesbians. And what critical race theory is all about, and I was blessed to write foreword with my dear sister Kimberly Crenshaw and brother Kendall Thomas and others, was what does America look like through the lens of the enslaved, the lynched, the Jim Crow and the James Crow, but still falling back on a rich New World African tradition that provides dignity and self-respect. And no one theory has the truth. I believe all of us fall short. But there's no way you'll ever understand America and its development without understanding the fundamental role of slavery, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, degradation, and of course, never understand American culture without the role of American language and ways of stylizing space and time, the way people walk and talk. I mean, it's just been from Elvis Presley to John Travolta, all of them imitating Black brothers in so many different ways. And of course, the greatest artistic breakthrough and aesthetic achievement of the 20th century is Black music. I mean, it's the greatest tradition of the 20th century, the most barbaric century of all time. Over 150 million people killed in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. And yet here's this blues inflicted music that can take us places we know not of. You remember what Henry Highland Garnett said in 1837? He's standing on his crutch. He only got one leg. And he says, never confuse the situation of Black people with that of Israelites of the Old Testament. For Black people, pharaohs on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. And then somebody had to sing a song. How do you sustain hope? How do you stay in motion? How do you sustain movement? California Endowment Live. How do you embody hope? Somebody sang a song. Well, that's very much what critical race theory is trying to keep track of in the country. And so if in Florida, they live in denial, not all the folk in Florida, but too many, they living in denial. They think they can live a life based on lies, sustain the nation based on lies, then you reap what you sow. You're going to reap what you sow.
Speaking of faith, Dr. West, Jennifer from Los Angeles, her question about the importance of the church and the movement today. She asked how is the role of the church different today, perhaps in the future, than it was when you were growing up?
Well, one is
presumably as it relates to civil rights and social justice.
Civil rights, yeah. Again, we got the problem of courage, and we've got the problem of longevity, of integrity. That in a spiritually decaying culture, you're going to get a spiritually decaying church. You're going to get a spiritually decaying mosque and synagogue too. The market forces are going to take over. So you end up with highly commodified religion and prosperity gospels, and thinking that somehow Jesus running out the money changes in the church have nothing to do with his moral and political stance. No, he was put on the cross. He was put on the cross by the largest empire of that day, the Roman Empire, because he went in and ran out the money changers, 400 troops protecting that edifice, the biggest edifice west of Rome, ragtag disciples pulling back, acting as if they don't know him, denying him. He went in anyway. Why? He didn't hate the rich. He hated greed, and he loved poor people. So that's the Jesus that is not as accessible in our churches. It's the commodified Jesus. It's the marketized Jesus. Come in and dip in a little Kool-Aid at the bottom of the cross, and you get your blessing, your next commodity. Here's your next a product. No, they got nothing to do with Jesus of Nazareth, who said, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me. Must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? No. There's a cross for everyone, and there's a cross for me. That's a little different than prosperity gospel, you see. No, you got to be able to fortify yourself and then put on the full armor of Ephesians 6 and learn how to be a soldier in the Lord's army. That's what's kept Black people going, especially in the prophetic wing of the church. And the same is true in mosque and synagogue and temple. When the whole culture is commodified, we saw that in the Super Bowl, right? Shop like a billionaire. They got the reptiles doing the electric slide. No, that's our dance. But you got the animals doing it like somehow it's just a joke. That ain't no joke. The way in which Black people move go back to African cultures that are part and parcel of our struggle. The very way in which we talk and use our bodies as part and parcel for preserving our sanity and our dignity. It's not to be used to sell some piece of soap. That's commodification across the board. Ashford and Simpson, two of the greatest love warriors alongside Stevie Wonder, using their music to just sell a piece of X or Y. Hey, don't disrespect us like that. We know that's the case. So what do? We put it in the right context and we say, we are not parasites on your host. We come from a great people of a great tradition that gives us eyes to see, heart to feel, ears to hear the cries that are not heard by other people. And most importantly, courage to act, not because we messiahs, but we just want to lead the world a little different than we found it, because we want to be part of this tradition. And it's embracing of all people of all colors, but it begins again on the Black side. And that to me is what it was, as the Delphonics would say. When you get right down to it, that's really what it's all about. Where's that love?
You just gave me goosebumps, Dr. West, and the chat was full of preach on and preach. A question from Bob Johnson, who works at Occidental College in Los Angeles, notes that the United States Supreme Court is expected to issue a major opinion on affirmative action in higher education in the next few months, and everyone expects the court to rule against affirmative action. As someone who has spent most of his career in academia, what do you think will be the impact of that decision, and what must we do?
Well, absolutely right. That we've got a deeply conservative court, so we shouldn't have a high expectation. We should note that the Supreme Court has always been deeply, deeply conservative and over against the needs of Black folk for the most part. The Warren Court was very, very different. And even the Warren Court, if it had not been for our dear brother Walter Gordon, who was one of the great figures to come out of UC Berkeley. Me and Cliff were just talking about him, best friend of Earl Warren, taught Earl Warren's son when he was a coach at UC Berkeley, the first graduate at JD with a law school at Bold Hall. Earl Warren had an openness to Black folk, partly because of his very, very close friendship and brotherhood with Walter Gordon. And so the Warren Court is an exception in the history of the court. So generally speaking, it has not been in the interest of poor and working people, let alone Black people. So we shouldn't be surprised, but we do have to be ready. And being ready means what? We got to come up with some strategies. How are we going to make sure that our young people gain access to both formal education and informal? You see, Black people have never depended solely or exclusively on schools. We've had people who have loved us to teach us in other contexts, be it homes, be it our own communal context, be it our churches, be it our mosques, be it our synagogues, be it in the studio. We have to keep education going, and we've got to believe deeply that everyday people have potential for talent and genius that can change the world.
Dr. West, we have a question from a student, Dion, at UC Riverside campus. And her question is, in an era when it feels like political leaders are for sale, how can someone who aspires to public office succeed without selling out their morals or vision?
Well, that's a powerful, powerful question. I'm telling you, I've learned from Brother Mark Lee Thomas and others that you have to be willing to pay major, major costs. There's no doubt about that. But the best thing we have are examples. You know, when you look in the academy, You got to find the examples who represent not purity, but integrity, longevity of truth telling, longevity of witness bearing. Not always right, not always wrong, but most importantly, have their hearts fundamentally grounded in trying to keep track of the rich humanity of poor Black folk and working Black folk. Now, all Black folk in general, but as a Christian, there's always a tilt toward the least of these. What you've done unto me, the prisoner, the orphan, the widow, the fatherless, the motherless, the marginal, that's what you've done. What you've done unto them, you've done unto me. That's the biblical imperative. And so I think that we have to be the examples and to the best of our ability. And we can't do it alone. That's why I need Cliff West. That's why I need my wife, Anahita. That's why I need my family. That's why I need memories of those who love me. That's why I need memories of my ancestors, not just the Black ones, but the John Browns and the Ann Bradens and the Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and the Edward Zaids, the Noam Chomskys and Stanley Aronowitz. It's a multiracial affair because human beings can choose to be forces of good with courage and vision, both in organized forms as well as in their individual lives. If you think about running for office, study Harold Washington, study Shirley Chisholm, study the high moments of Adam Clayton Powell, study those politicians that held on as long as they could. And all of them fall short in various ways, but they held on. These days, oh my God, it's survival of the slickest, obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught.
Survival of the slickest. We've got about a minute left, Dr. West. So for those among us in this audience, and I think the number is probably going to be close to 2,000 by the time this evening is over, who find ourselves at moments growing tired and weary and pessimistic, as Sam Cooke in his song says, just feeling knocked to our knees and beat down. Leave us with a sense of action and optimism. Why should we not give up? What do we need to do?
One is we cannot give up because the love that has been put inside of us, poured inside of us, will not allow us to hold our peace. So whatever we're up against, we got to fight spiritually, economically. I love the way you all define health. Wherever you live, wherever you are, whatever the context, psychic health, mental health, physical health, you've got to be fortified in order to fight. Because we are jazz people. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And that swing got a love stang in it. And justice is what love looks like in public, just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. Black people at our best, we've been a tender people, kind and a sweet people, you see. And that tenderness goes hand in hand with a toughness. And that soulfulness and sweetness goes hand in hand with a willingness to tell the truth regardless of what the consequences are. And for those of us tied to Jesus of Nazareth, no matter what your theology is, because I'm a hang loose Baptist. I love Jesus and the rest is commentary. So I don't worry about a whole lot of other things in this regard. But if you're going to follow this Jesus of Nazareth, then it means then there's going to be cruciform. You know, the old folk used to say a good Christian must look good on wood. Now, I'm not saying that martyrdom is normative for the Christian, but it means that's who you are following. Looking good on wood because there's a promise that lo and behold, you're going to be surprised by the joy, which is the fruit of love, surprised by the effects of your love, but it's not a utilitarian calculation. You do it because it's right and it's moral and it's just, and you find joy in the struggle and joy in serving others. That's the greatness of a people. How do we pass on that moral and spiritual greatness to the whole species given ecological catastrophe, nuclear catastrophe,
Yes, sir.
grotesque wealth inequality, white supremacy escalating, neo-fascism coming in our faces, and we continue in our blues sense in saying, lo and behold, the last word will be the last word of a love and justice of a people going down swinging if we got to go down, but swinging nevertheless.
Dr. West, you have been amazing, brother. As always, I just want to say, I feel love for you, brother, and our audience does as well. I can just feel it. I'm just goosebumps hearing your witness, moving us to greater heights and greater aspirations. And for each one of us, whether we are Black or not, to express Black prophetic fire in our everyday lives. And so a round of appreciation for Dr. Cornel West.
Brother, I'm giving you a big hug, though. I'm giving you a big hug, brother.
Yes,
23 years of high quality leadership. Whoa,
yes,
that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
So with that, thank you for talking with us tonight, Dr. West. To our audience, thank you. Watch your inboxes for a link to a recording of this event. Share it with your friends. Before we leave tonight, some exciting news about upcoming events. Excited to announce that on April 11th at 6 p.m., CalEndow Live will host Jane Fonda, legendary actor and social and political activist, on a virtual stage. Our conversation will cover her half-century of work advocating for women's rights and environmental justice, and her commitment to intersectionality and feminism and in social justice movements. It's going to be a great event. Please join us, sending love and appreciation to each and every one of you for what you do to make our communities a better and wellness place. Thank you.